and welcome. I'm Dr. Liliana, and this is the Pelvic Empowerment Podcast. And I am so excited to finally be back. I did the typical ADHD thing where you get really excited and you learn a whole new program and you write all these drafts for podcast episodes and you do all the things and then you publish one episode and then it's like, okay, done, I'm never going to visit this again. So my last episode, my first and final episode, was released in June, and now here we are in November and I'm back. Hopefully with a little bit more of a grounded structure and plan. My desire and intention is to show up to this platform a little bit more often. I was pretty focused on Instagram and other social media platform and my website, trying to get things out on there. But I do think podcasting is suited for me just because I do love to talk and I do love to just riff. Yeah, I'm a very vibey, riffy person, so I think this will be good. And I'm gonna try to post to YouTube as well. So if you listened to the first episode and wanted to hear more, thank you for your patience. Here I finally am. And if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm really excited and I'm really looking forward to all of the content that I can bring through this medium and this platform. So starting this episode with a bit of a, I don't know what you want to call that, just looking back on the past couple months where we've been, and now I'm excited to move forward. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being with me. And yeah, maybe this is an invitation. This is definitely an invitation for me to love myself and love the way that my process just happens to unfold. And so maybe I can extend that invitation to you as well. And maybe you can receive it, loving yourself exactly as you are, knowing that the way that you're showing up is already perfect and more than enough. So with that being said, let's transition into the topic of today's video, which is, I don't know what it's gonna be titled ultimately, but I wanted to create a short and sweet video to just touch on the physical, emotional, and energetic aspects of the pelvis, because it's not typically talked about in that way, as an all-encompassing, from an all-encompassing lens. Typically, in my world, I'm a doctor of physical therapy and I specialize in the pelvic floor. So typically in my world, we are just, or the world I come from, what I should say is, we look at it just from the physical perspective. And one of the reasons why I left clinical practice is because I wanted more space to explore the emotional side and the energetic side, because it is all intertwined. The physical impacts the emotional and the energetic. The energetic impacts the physical and the emotional, and so on and so on. As many combinations as you can make, they all create this beautiful web that interweaves and creates the manifestation that is your pelvis, the state of your pelvis, the state of your pelvic floor. So in this episode, I kind of want to explore and share, what do each of those realms actually entail? What is the physical pelvis versus the emotional and energetic pelvis? And from there, you can begin to understand the connection and then go even deeper and explore, how does this impact me? How does this impact you? How does it impact each of us as individuals? Because this work, pelvic work, is so profound because it impacts each of us differently. And it's so complex. There are so many different cascades and combinations and presentations of the pelvis. So yeah, I want to equip you with a little bit of background, and then hopefully we'll have many, many more episodes where we go into deep specifics. So yeah, let's get it. All right, so let's start with the physical pelvis. So the physical pelvis is literally everything that you can touch, everything that, if you were surgically operated into, the things that we could actually find in your body and touch in your body, right? So the physical pelvis includes the bony pelvis, the bone structure of the pelvis, the muscle tissue in the pelvis, so the pelvic floor, that hammock-like or bowl-like group of muscles. It also includes the nerves, which are, part of your nervous system. They come down from your spine and they sort of interweave in between different muscles and send signals between the pelvis and the brain. It also includes connective tissue. So the connective tissue is the fascia is what I'm talking about. Fascia is what wraps all parts, all of your insides are wrapped in fascia, and fascia is what keeps everything in place and is what connects everything. It's connective tissue. So you'll find fascia in between your bone and your muscle, in between muscle and muscle, in between muscle and nerve. So your fascia is part of your physical pelvis, as well as all of the organs that are in your pelvic bowl, right? So you have your like your urinary system organs, so your bladder, your urethra. You have your bowel, your digestive system organs. So you have your like the bottom of your large intestines. And then you also have your reproductive system. So whatever reproductive organs you have, they live in your pelvis. So that's another component of the physical pelvis. So your physical pelvis, there is an optimal way that your physical pelvis should be operating, right? We want your pelvic floor to be really strong, and we also want you to be able to relax in your pelvic floor. The nerves in your pelvis should be able to send really clear signals without sending any signals of pain or like altered sensation. Your fascia should be able to allow everything to slide and glide while also holding everything firmly together. Your urinary system, you should be able to pee. Your digestive system, you should be able to poop. Your reproductive system, you should be able to you should be fertile, or you should be able to all these things, right? Like there is an ideal way that all of the physical systems should be running and operating. And when something is not operating in its ideal sense, for instance, if you have incontinence, if you're having pelvic pain, if you're struggling with infertility, right, there are doctors that you can go to that will support you. So this is one whole world of the pelvis, right? So like there are so many specialties even within just the physical sense, and Western medicine tends to get stuck here. Western medicine says, okay, we're looking at the physical, we're looking at the symptoms, we're making a diagnosis, we are trying to treat symptoms or quote cure symptoms, right? All of this stuff, and it's all at the physical level, right? So my degree, my clinical doctorate, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. So my work is really focused on the pelvic floor aspect of the physical pelvis. And OBGYN would be more focused on the internal organs. A urologist would be focused on specifically the urinary part of the organs. What I did in my work was I still focus on all of the physical aspects, but I've taken a step back and I've started to look at the emotional and energetic aspects as well. So let's look at those, and then we'll end the episode by kind of tying it all together. So we've looked at the physical piece, right? So now the emotional piece is looking at how do the emotions or the emotions that you experience or that one may experience, how do those emotions manifest in the body? Now, the reason this is so important, and one way to begin to think about this, is that every thought that you have, every emotion that you have, every experience of life that you have is coded in your body chemically, right? So like you have the thought of something exciting, right? You see something, or even if it's not really in front of you, you just think of this thing. What is actually happening on that emotional level? Well, what's happening is your brain is perceiving this potential reality, let's call it, and that again is coded chemically in your body, that and electrically in the brain, and that perception is sent down the rest of the chain, the rest of the body. This is why if you think of like a past event that was really scary, your body may tense. Or if you think of someone, like when you would think of someone you had a crush on, right? Like you would get all like hot and excited. Or if you think of something, I don't know, I don't have another example off the top of my head, but you get the point, right? Where it's like you think of something and you feel it in your body, right? If you think of like a deadline that you have coming up. You might even start to get stressed. You may clench your jaw. So this is where the first point where we start to see some crossover, right? Where we're looking at emotions, but we're seeing it influence the physical. So when it comes to the pelvis, there are an entire like group of emotions or a class of emotions that tend to affect the pelvis and the pelvic floor specifically directly. And these emotions are emotions that are related to fear, to shame, emotions associated with the embodiment of silence, right? Like when you've been silenced, that emotion of being like stifled in your expression, of not being able to express creatively, when you feel any sense of unfulfillment or unacknowledgement. These are the types of emotions and emotions similar that tend to get, quote, right, like stored in your pelvis. So what that means is when someone experiences these symptoms or these emotions consistently over time, there is a correlation with the tension that this person or these people feel in their pelvic floor. The pelvic floor will respond on a physical level to these emotions. So that's what we mean by emotions being stored in the pelvis. And a lot of times, doing work either at the pelvic floor or even just in the hips, because the hips are still a part of the pelvis, um, can bring up these emotions. This is why we see, like in yoga, the classic like hip openers make everyone cry, right? Like we get into these deep hip stretches, and it's been I don't know if there's any like study on this. I was gonna say it's been shown. I don't think there's I gotta look, but I don't know of any like evidence-based studies. But just in the yoga community, in the sort of like movement community, it's known that, hip openers, hip exercises, hip stretches tend to invoke a pretty significant emotional response when the person, is in that state. If it obviously doesn't happen every single time, and just because you have emotions stored in your hips or in your pelvis doesn't mean that a stretch is going to get it out directly, but it does happen that way for a lot of people. So that's the emotional pelvis, is understanding that the pelvis has a direct response to certain emotions. Like I said, that sort of those types of emotions, because different emotions are stored differently in the body. Like a lot of people tend to store sort of like productivity stress around worth, stress around the way you're showing up in the world, stress about, different things like that. That tends to go in the shoulders, in the jaw, even in the neck. And there's a bunch of different correlations too. Like I've heard some people say like financial stress is stored in the low back, like things like that. And I'm obviously not an expert in those things, but I am more familiar and well versed with the emotions that go to the pelvis. So typically, any emotion that is causing you to feel not expressed in your most authentic embodiment, or anything associated with fear and shame, those things can impact the pelvic area directly. So that's the emotional side. And then the energetic side is the more like, this is my favorite one. And this is what I'm most excited to talk about typically. And why I had to kind of carve my own path, because there tends not to be a ton of space for this conversation in the clinical setting, and even like I said before, like, oh, I don't know any studies. Like the clinical setting tends to be very evidence-based, very like show me the research. And when it comes to energetic embodiment, there isn't really any research, and that doesn't bother me. And for the people that want to receive this work, typically it doesn't bother them as well. But for all the people that do like to be more evidence-based, this is where we can hit a little bit of dissonance sometimes. But like I said, it doesn't bother me. So we're here for the conversation, right? And then you can draw your own conclusions, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But when it comes to the energetic pelvis, kind of like when we did physical, I listed all the different pieces of anatomy. Your energetic anatomy now is a very real thing, and it includes your root chakra, your sacral chakra, to some degree your solar plexus chakra, not entirely, but to some degree. So your lower three energetic centers. If you've never heard of the chakra system, it is a yogic system that depicts all these different energy centers that we have within our body, and it's just a channel straight up that starts at your root, starts at your pelvis, and travels all the way up to the top of your head. So the first two are absolutely in your pelvic region, and the third one like definitely applies, and there are some themes that we'll explore in other episodes, and I talk about this in other parts of my work. But so the lower three chakras, we can say, as well as your womb space, so your energetic womb. And now this is its own space entirely, because this brings in the conversation like another side of healing when it comes to healing the pelvic space, because your womb space, I would argue all people have a womb space. I feel like in some corners of the pelvic world, some people would argue that only women have a womb space. But I think that argument falls apart real quick when you ask the question, like, what about people that were born with a uterus and then had their uterus taken out, right? That doesn't mean, once you've had a hysterectomy, it doesn't mean that you're no longer a woman. Therefore, just because you don't have a physical womb doesn't mean that you don't have an energetic womb. So I argue that all people have an energetic womb space, and just like the chakras, there are specific energies associated with them. I'll go through them quickly. Actually, I realized I didn't mention them before, but your root chakra is the energetic center of safety and abundance. Your sacral chakra is the energetic center of sensuality, play, pleasure, creativity. And your solar plexus chakra is your energetic center of power and authority, and like almost like self, you're like inner power, your authentic inner power and your inner fire, we can say. Those are the chakra centers. Your womb space is the energetic center, and this is separate from the chakra system. Your womb space is the energetic center of creation energy and of like that nurturing energy. And similar to the physical womb, it's the energetic embodiment of waiting, and sort of like, not necessarily waiting, but this sort of like cultivating and creation energy, the same way that a physical womb would begin life, that creation moment, and then nurture it and support it and help it as it gestates, right? The energetic womb space does the exact same thing for all other areas of your life that require that energy. So even when it comes to starting a business or any other creative project, that same energy is present. And just like we saw with the physical pelvis, right? Like, there is an optimal state of being, right? And when something is out of that optimal state, when it's out of balance or out of alignment, we have an opportunity to intervene and heal to some capacity. And this isn't to say that, like, any of us are broken and need fixing, but there are areas, and there are areas of our lives that we can look at and say, how do I want this to be? How do I want this to be optimized? What is my vision for my life? So when it comes to the emotional pelvis and the energetic pelvis, there is a sort of optimal state, just like with the physical pelvis. So with your energetic centers specifically, there is a balanced state for each of these energetic centers to be in. And you'll see this in the chakra system. If you have like an unbalanced root chakra, there are, quote, like symptoms, right? Like if you have an overactive root chakra versus an underactive root chakra, and we want to come to that central, that aligned, balanced state where we're not acting from a wounded or a traumatized embodiment. We are in a balanced, healed, grounded embodiment, and from there, navigate life and all the different circumstances. So now, to tie it all together, we have the physical, the emotional, the energetic. How does all of this come together? And what does that look like in the context of the pelvic empowerment movement? So for me, and the way I run this work and what this movement is based on is, what is it that you want, right? Like, to me, that's the highest form of empowerment. It's not about what do I as the practitioner think you need to be, like, how do I think you should be? How do I, what markers do I think you need to be hitting? What metrics, right? It's not up to me. It's ultimately up to you. If you are comfortable with the way that your life is presenting, that's empowered. Good for you. Like, I love that for you, right? But if there's any part of you that's saying, my most empowered self, my most authentic self, my most embodied self is different. I can recognize that that's different than where I am now. And I want to heal. I want to grow. I want things in my reality to shift. In order for that to happen, we have to look at the physical and emotional and energetic, because all of these realms, all of these aspects of the body, aspects of your reality, they all work together to create the embodiment, the manifestation that is you, right? So the first step, tying this all together, is really defining your vision. What is the vision that you have for your life, and I guess for your pelvis specifically, because there are so many themes of the pelvis. Typically, we're looking at things like sex, sensuality, your bleed, right? Like your cycles, birth, pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, um, gender affirming care and procedures, things like that, right? When we're looking at the pelvis specifically. And the reason I say I tend to zoom out a lot and talk about your authentic self, your most authentic embodiment, is because all of these experiences that happen at the pelvis are core experiences to who you are and the way that you show up to the world, right? There's this like famous line that floats around in the pelvic space of like, the way that you do sex is the way that you do life, right? So, and I think that's so real, and with so many of my clients that's come up as like a very real thing, and true like metaphor, and all of these things, right? Like your gender expression and the way that you view yourself and the way that you express outwardly, like that impacts so much of your life. It's not just pelvic specific. And even your bleeds, right? Like all of it, like the cycles of bleeding, of becoming like a birthing, like getting ready to experience birth, getting ready to experience menopause. These are all core experiences of life, and that have the potential to really impact every other aspect of life. So the pelvis literally is core to so many things in life and to so many experiences, and it's just core to the way that life happens and that you show up to life, right? So the first step in all of this, again, tying it all together, defining your vision at both just the purely pelvic level and also that sort of zoomed out life perspective, authentic self, authentic embodiment perspective, defining that first. And then what we do in our pelvic empowerment coaching sessions is looking at all of these different realms, right? So I use my clinical knowledge to help you understand, okay, what's happening on a physical level? How can we optimize on a physical level? Then I put my coach hat on and we start talking about like, how are your emotions influencing the physical? How is your energetic embodiment influencing your emotions and influencing your physical? So looking at all of these different areas, because you are not a singular, like you are a multidimensional being. You are complex. The way that your pelvic floor presents is influenced by so much more than just your pelvic floor, right? So we have to look at all of these different areas, all of these different expressions, all of these different realms of being in order to come to an actual sustained and healed place. And the example I always use is that, like, if you're experiencing pelvic tightness, so like your pelvic floor is really tight and you're struggling to relax, all the stretching in the world is not going to sustainably heal that pelvic tightness if the tightness is happening as a result of like heightened emotions and unbalanced energies, right? So if it's truly the root cause is energetic or emotional, the physical isn't going to be enough. For a lot of people, the physical is enough, right? A lot that, pelvic floor physical therapy is so successful because of that, right? You absolutely can see results by just looking at one area, right? And similarly with like therapy, like healing your emotions, understanding your trauma and learning how to deal with your emotions and navigate your emotions can bring like full body healing, absolutely. But the way that I structure this in my work is creating room for all three to have a seat at the table kind of at the same time. There's no need to go to a million different people when you can when you do find a practitioner that resonates with you and has the capacity to look at all of it with you. So that is the basis of my work. This is how the pelvis, according to me, is physical, emotional, and energetic. And pelvic empowerment is the process of, again, defining that most empowered vision and also feeling empowered in your understanding of the pelvis, in your embodiment of your emotions, and in the expression of yourself, so that's how it all ties together. So I hope that this episode was clear, and I tend to have one of my fears in this work is that I ramble and don't actually come to clarity. So I hope that this was clear and that it gave a really good understanding of the different layers of pelvic healing and the different the worlds that we kind of get to explore with this work. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I would love to hear from you. If this episode was informative, if any reflections at all, I'm very open to hearing. So let me know. But ultimately, like I said, I hope that this episode gave you a pretty grounded understanding that the pelvis, is physical as well as emotional and energetic. And hopefully having this understanding, having this knowledge can be an inspiration for you to start noticing how your pelvis presents physically, emotionally, and energetically. What's true for you in all of these realms? And beyond that, I am here for you. I am a resource for you. Pelvic empowerment coaching sessions are available. I am taking new clients, and I do them virtually. So if you want support in exploring any of these areas, receiving feedback as you explore these areas, and just some loving guidance to walk alongside you, I am here and available for that. And I would love to support you in that. This is my life's work, and I am so, so passionate about it. So I hope this episode was really resonant for you. And if you would like more information, you can find my services and all ways to reach me at the website, which is Pelvic Empowerment Movement, just MVMT.com. And all of it's there linked for you. Thank you for sticking around for this episode after that 5-month hiatus. And I hope to be back with more episodes soon. And we will dive into all of this deeper in upcoming episodes. So stay tuned. Sending you lots of love. We'll talk soon, friend.